Hello friends, I would like to tell you about what happened to my son in 2001. He was in the hospital in Ninewells in Dundee, and they told him that he was a wee bit under the weather and the serious illness he had was just a slight lesion on his lung. Now you've got that word now, just a slight lesion on his left lung, and that was what they told me. So they released him from the hospital as they were anxious for the beds. They sent him home and they said that if he looked after himself and fed himself and became healthier, to come back within 12 weeks, and they would check him up to make sure he was okay. The consultant surgeon in that hospital, Dr. Anthony France, assured me that my son had had 3 x-rays on his lungs to make sure he was okay, as he suffered from a rare form of vasculitis called Wagner's granulomatosis. It was an extremely rare disease of the lungs, etc., that was discovered in 1931, and they'd never been able to cure it, but they just gave you drugs to keep you alive. Now, after the 12 weeks was over, my son went back into the hospital and they said that he was okay and he could go away on his holidays as everything was alright. So, him and his girlfriend at the time went to America. And we arrived in America, he collapsed in Wichita in Kansas. He was taken into the hospital there. And I'm just reading it from this letter here. It says, he was treated by a Dr. Fleming, a Dr. Robert Fleming in Wichita. And they decided that Bob needed an operation to check his lungs. And they found Dr. Fleming performed the surgery, and you realised that Robert's lung was completely dead from the Wagner's granulomatosis, and it had to be removed. His post-operative course was complicated by the fact that had an infection with a bacteria called MRSA, which he had caught in the hospital in Dundee. And it was impossible to completely close the large wound in Robert's chest. Anytime this wound was closed, his chest cavity would fill up with pus and bacteria from the MRSA. Now he caught that in Dundee, and they turned round and said that he had 3 x-rays and everything was hunky-dory and he was okay to go. So how could they state that? How could that Dr. France in Dundee state that my son's lung was A-OK? And yet the doctors in America say that my son's lung had been dead. Surely to Christ there's something wrong there. But nobody was interested. I even contacted the hospital manager, and this is, I'll show you the letter. This is the letter there. Okay, I'm quite willing to show it to anybody. And the letter states, I have considered your letter and I have decided not to provide you with any further information you may require. They wouldn't tell me anything. They denied the fact that there was MRSA in the hospital. They denied the fact that what the doctor had said. They wouldn't even give me his medical records to check or anything. And that was it. They killed my son. And nobody was interested. My son was down in a hospital in America. And I couldn't get to America because I can't afford to go there. Obviously, like everybody else. To go to where he was in Wichita, it meant I would have to get the plane from Glasgow to Chicago. Then from Chicago you had to get another plane that went to Texas. Then you had to get another aeroplane that went from Texas to Kansas. And then I had to get to Wichita. And my son stayed in a place called El Dorado. It took 3 days to get there. It was impossible to be with my son. My son died on the 23rd of July 2008. He was only aged 36. And he would never have been in America if that bloody hospital in Dundee hadn't turned round and said that he was perfectly okay with just a slight lesion in his lung. It was more than a slight lesion if his lung was dead. I pity help anybody else that ever ends up in Dundee Hospital. I certainly wouldn't go near it. I suffered from an illness myself, and they've told me I could go to Ninewells Hospital in Dundee. I would rather die before I would go there. And as for that Dr. Anthony France and that hospital manager, GERRY MARR, Chief Operating Officer, I curse yous. May the Lord strike ye down. I put a gypsy's curse on ye, and every other kind of curse there is. I know what I would call you, and I'm not afraid to call you it. These are a bunch of bloody quacks. Sue me if you like, I've got nothing left. My son was all I had left after his mum died in a house fire in 1980. And I spent all that time looking after my son and bringing him up. And you took him from me, you killed him. You bunch of quacks. I couldn't even be weird to say Cheerio, son, and hold his hand when he was dying. You can't imagine the grief I suffer. My son was all I had.